He was glamorous, he was different, he was in some ways anti-establishment. He was often referred to as something of a swordsman. He certainly had plenty of notches on his bedpost.
Perhaps an unlikely couple, their union had the potential to modernize the monarchy.
Anthony Armstrong Jones's story stands out as a testament to the complexities of love while you're living within the confines of monarchy. This is a story of a love affair that nearly destroyed the British monarchy as we know it today. A princess's love life. Princess Margaret, the younger sister of Queen Elizabeth II, lived a life that was often marked by controversy, romance, and a desire to just blend in and live a normal life like everyone else. Their story begins in the late 1950s, a time when Princess Margaret was navigating the aftermath of a failed romance with Captain Peter Townsend, a divorced man whose proposal she was ultimately unable to accept due to societal and royal constraints. Margaret met Peter when she was just a teenager, but their romance would not begin until years later when she was 22 years old. It was then that she had to choose between love and her royal duties. The large age gap between her and Peter and the fact that he was divorced made it basically impossible for her to marry him. So heartbroken and discouraged, Margaret had to open her heart up to love again, and before long, she would meet another man who would change her life forever. Margaret's first encounter with Anthony. While still going through her own turmoil, Margaret encountered Anthony Armstrong Jones, a charismatic and talented photographer whose arrival into her life would forever dramatically change its course. Margaret and Anthony first met at a dinner party in 1958, and soon after began a secretive courtship. The reason that they kept their relationship a secret was because defied royal conventions and brought a lot of negative publicity to the monarchy.
You go after him and I'll divorce you.
Oh, you wouldn't dare.
These two people had very different backgrounds. Margaret was a member of the royal family and had grown up with all the many things that lifestyle brings with it. Meanwhile, Anthony was technically just a commoner, but that hardly means he grew up poor. In fact, his family was very well-to-do. However, his childhood was full of its own challenges due to his nearly deadly battle against polio. He spent a long time in the hospital, away from his family and friends. It wasn't until he recovered that he discovered his life's passion, photography. While this was something he was very talented in, it wasn't necessarily a profession that the royal family would have chosen for Margaret's future husband. But despite the differences between Margaret and Anthony, their connection flourished and grew stronger and stronger in the shadows. They took every step they could to shield themselves and their newly formed love from the prying eyes of the press and the strict expectations of palace protocol. The fact that Margaret was interested in pursuing a relationship with a commoner at all would have been considered absolutely insane at the time. Everyone would have been expecting her to marry someone of royal status, not someone like Anthony. But this was Margaret showing once again that she didn't care what people thought about her. Anthony had actually been introduced to the royal family years earlier. This happened when he was hired to come in and photograph Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles. His later encounters with Margaret, even though they were often very quick, sparked a chemistry that neither one of them could deny. You could certainly say that Anthony's initial attraction to Margaret was based in part by the fact that she was hard to get. What guy wouldn't be excited by the challenge of pursuing a royal romance? The pair would find different ways to see each other without anyone finding out. Sometimes this meant secret meetings at Anthony's studio.
Anthony kept his private life under wraps. His early clandestine meetings with Princess Margaret were kept well hidden, and their partnership didn't become public knowledge until they announced their engagement.
They kept their relationship secret because the press at that time tended only to write about these things when they were given a press release. And Margaret and Tony tended to congregate in places where they knew they were fairly safe.
Even when they appeared at the same social gatherings, they were careful to conceal how they felt about one another from prying eyes. They did this by avoiding any public displays of affection. When Margaret did go to visit Anthony, she would dress as simply as she possibly could in order to avoid attracting any unneeded attention.
She would dress very unobtrusively. She wore a tweed skirt, she wore a headscarf, she wore sunglasses, and she was dropped in the next door street because there was a little alleyway through. He would take her on the back of his motorbike. He had a room in Rotherhithe. It was very romantic, really. At high tide, swans would float past. They would have a meal there, and the princess, it was rather exciting for her.
A secret romance revealed. The unfolding drama of Margaret and Antony's relationship reached a peak when Margaret confessed to accepting Antony's proposal on the same day that the news broke that her ex, Captain Townsend, was going to marry another woman. This was a very emotional time for Margaret. After all, for a long time, she didn't think she wanted to get married at all, but she couldn't resist Antony's charms and the thought of starting a new life with him. Their engagement was kept a secret until after the birth of Queen Elizabeth's third child, Prince Andrew. Their decision to keep the fact that they were engaged private for so long fueled a lot of wild rumors. The announcement of Margaret's engagement sent shockwaves throughout the royal family and beyond. All of this drama was unfolding in front of the public for all to see. Had Margaret been the one in line for the throne instead of her sister Elizabeth, she quite literally would have been cut off. Many people believed that the royal family had tried to split them up or keep them apart, but these two soon made it clear that nothing was going to stand in the way of them being together. Margaret and Antony's wedding was a very memorable and historic event. It was the first ever televised royal wedding, which captivated millions of viewers around the world on May 6, 1960.
Enthusiasm for the wedding was such that all along the processional route, people camped out the night before.
Against the backdrop of Westminster Abbey, Margaret and Antony exchanged vows that symbolized both the triumph of love and the weight of royal expectations. Antony, the humble photographer, became the first Earl of Snowdon.
A very thrilling day for the royal family, and there was a big ovation for them. Meanwhile, at Westminster Abbey, Princess Anne arrived with 7 other bridesmaids, all looking sweet.
It was a royal occasion that would be talked about for years to come.
All along the route, the people waved and cheered Princess Margaret. It was her day, and hers was so obviously a love match. One can be certain that as she drove through the crowded streets, she must have been touched by the affection that surrounded her.
Talk of the wedding between this pair stretched around the world. The couple seemed to know that their marriage would be full of challenges. They were certainly right about having to face challenges throughout their marriage. The first one came along very soon and was shocking enough to break up any marriage. The first scandal. The first of many scandals in this couple's marriage came after the birth of a little baby named Polly Fry, who was rumored to be Antony's illegitimate daughter. Rumors about infidelity began to swirl, bringing about a firestorm of controversy. Infidelity in a marriage, not to mention having a child outside of wedlock with another woman, went against every single rule of royal decorum. It wasn't until years later that the truth was revealed. Antony had been unfaithful to Margaret while they were dating. He had relations with Camilla Fry, who gave birth to Polly just a couple of weeks before Antony and Margaret were married. But in order to keep Polly's paternity a secret, the little girl was passed off as the biological daughter of Jeremy Fry, Camilla's husband. Considering the fact that Camilla and Jeremy were supposedly good friends of Antony and Margaret's, you can only imagine how awkward keeping this huge bombshell a secret for so long must have been. It certainly tested the limits of Margaret and Antony's relationship. Polly's paternity was confirmed when she was well into adulthood by a DNA test. The news of Antony's infidelity shattered the illusion of domestic bliss between Margaret and Antony. For Polly, we can only imagine how painful and confusing it must have been to discover that much of what she had been taught growing up had been a lie. Infidelity on both sides.
There were multiple infidelities, there were affairs of different lengths.
Antony was certainly not the only one to have problems with staying faithful in this marriage. There was infidelity on both sides. Once Margaret's relationship with Antony was already rumored to be on the rocks. She was already starting a new secret romance with someone else. That someone was a man named Roddy Llewellyn. Roddy was a British designer and journalist. Even during the years when Princess Margaret was young, if you were a part of the royal family, you could count on the press, watching your every move, no matter where you went or how far away from the public eye you thought you may be. The way much of the world found out about Margaret and Roddy's affair was through the British tabloids. There on the cover were Margaret and Roddy frolicking together on a private island.
Their behavior became public knowledge and threatened the reputation of the monarchy.
Why were the taxpayers giving her money? Was it just so she could indulge herself with a toy boy in the Caribbean?
It was pretty clear what was going on here, and this would end up serving as the final nail in the coffin on Margaret's marriage to Antony. Yet, amid all the betrayal and trouble that Margaret and Antony always seemed to be having within their marriage, they still seemed to share mutual respect for one another. Margaret and Antony call it quits. After years of rumors of extramarital affairs, scandals, and personal drama within Margaret and Antony's marriage, it finally came to an end. It officially unraveled in 1976 when they first announced their separation. The news reverberated throughout the entire royal establishment. Divorce was simply considered not an option for the royal family in the past. You were supposed to find a way to settle your differences. Airing your dirty laundry by announcing your divorce publicly definitely would have been considered a stain upon the royals' public image.
And their divorce was as spectacular as their stormy relationship.
Divorce was not the done thing, and indeed there hadn't been a divorce in the royal family since the time of Henry VIII.
The dissolution of their marriage was shocking and completely unprecedented. For the monarchy, it represented a major step away from years and years of tradition. It proved that dynamics of royal relationships were officially changing, and a new, modern era was beginning. In the aftermath of their separation, Margaret and Antony navigated their very public divorce with dignity and grace. They were still committed to each other and made it clear that their focus upon their children, David and Sarah, was more important to them than anything else. They knew they had a shared responsibility, both as parents and as very public figures in the royal family. Despite the finality of their legal separation, their bond endured and they remained friends. Life after divorce. For Margaret, the years following her divorce were marked by a renewed sense of independence and self-discovery as she embraced new opportunities and forged her own path. She wasn't afraid to step away from royal tradition and didn't seem to be bothered by what other people thought about her. She continued her relationship with Roddy Llewellyn for 6 years, despite their major age difference and societal differences. For a second time in her life, Margaret proved that she was just fine with defying societal expectations while pursuing her own personal happiness. Antony, too, embarked on a new chapter in his life and ended up remarrying in 1978. He dedicated his life to giving back and helping others. His biggest passion was advocating on behalf of the disabled, a cause that resonated deeply with his own experiences of living with polio and growing up with a serious physical disability. Margaret and Antony's legacy. Margaret and Antony's respective journeys marked both triumph and tribulation. Together, they showed that love is complicated and sometimes pretty messy. But most importantly, they showed that just because you're a royal doesn't mean you're anything more than human. They certainly weren't perfect, but they were okay with that. The legacy of their relationship is one that goes beyond the boundaries of time and tradition. Despite how many years have passed, Margaret and Antony's story endures as a testament to the enduring power of love and resilience.